few more. Lads, I want to move things on, and I want to look at the Six Nations in a general sense as a whole, and the competition of 2012. It's been criticised deeply in the media over the past few weeks for the sense that it hasn't been as good as previous Six Nations campaigns. Alan, I want to come to yourself, and just let's look at, say, your 15 best players of the championship. What do you reckon? Who would fit the bill?
Yeah, sure. I'll just list them out.
Good man, yeah.
Front row, Gethin Jenkins, Rory Best, Adam Jones. Second row, Richie Gray, Paul O'Connell. Even though he was only fit for 3 games, I think he's done enough really to merit being in the best 15. Back row, Dan Lydiate at 6, Deuce Latour at 7. Even though he wears 6, he plays open side. And Ben Morgan at 8. I don't know, what do you think of that, lads?
What do you reckon there, Doc? Would yours be something similar to Alan's?
With mine, I'd agree to some extent with Alan, but I'd have Dan Cole. I think at a very good Six Nations. I think he does a lot more work around the pitch, particularly around ruck time. I think he's very disruptive, and he's really stepped up his work right there. So I'd have him at tight head. I'd agree with the second rows. I think Lydiate had a wonderful tournament, but I think Ferris had a pretty good tournament as well, and I think he's just a different class of player. I just think Ben Morgan is he's a good runner, and he's athletic enough for a guy who's carrying a lot of poundage, but for me it would have to be Parise, and I suspect when push comes to shove, Morgan will be third or fourth in the list of number 8s for Lions contention, but I'd have Deuce Latour at 7. I know he sometimes plays 6 for France, but as Alan rightly says, he plays more like a 7 in some respects, so it's a little bit of a hybrid back row, but that's by and large the way a lot of the teams are playing these days, and I think those 3 would give us a good balance, so that would be my pack.
How about that, William? Would Doc's hybrid back row float your boat?
Yeah, I would have gone for Ferris, Parise and Deuce Latour in the back row, again for similar reasons. Ferris made 63 tackles. Lydiate, who got man of the tournament, made 43. Not tackles aren't everything, obviously, but I thought Ferris' contribution was superb. And against...
There's a story in there as well, William, isn't there, which is it's not just the number of tackles Ferris makes, it's the fact that virtually every single one of them these days, he's putting guys back behind the gain line, and it makes a huge impact in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the front row, I'm beginning to become a fan of Corbus Yarrow. I watched him last year and thought, I knew he was good as a young guy playing for London Irish as a 20-year-old or 21-year-old. Rory Best again at 2, definitely not Hartley. I don't rate him at all. I know Mike probably thinks he's the bee's knees, but I just can't stand the guy. Adam Jones, because I think he's the best tight head in Europe. Although I also agree with Doc that Dan Cole had a good tournament, but I'll go with Jones. Gray, who's an immense talent, absolutely immense talent, and Paul O'Connell as the second line out jumper. I think he had a super tournament. The other second rows, none of them really stood out anywhere.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Yeah, so there would be my forwards.
Okay, thanks a million, William. Alan, list your backline for us there.
Yeah, sure. Phillips at 9, Farrell at 10, and then my outside backs. My centres first of all is Wesley Fofana at 12 and Jonathan Davies at 13, and then left wing, only one choice here, and that is the incredible George North. Right wing, Alex Cuthbert. I think probably the emerging player of the season for me. Really came out of nowhere. I think he's only got games for Cardiff at the start of this season, if I recall correctly. So his rise to fame has been very quick. I mean, much like George North's rise. And full-back, Rob Kearney, no debate about that, in my opinion.
Yeah, coming to yourself, Mike, our English fan. We've seen Alan there. He has quite a few Welsh players in his team of the Six Nations. Would you be of a similar mind? Would the likes of North and all get your vote?
Oh, definitely. I'm much in agreement there. I mean, the 2 Welsh wingers, very exciting, very young, twin battering rams. They're in my team. If you're just looking at this tournament and not who you think in general are the best players, I've got Phillips at scrum half, Farrell at 10. Fofana is a very exciting player, but Brad Barrett also had an excellent tournament and did nothing wrong either at 13 early on or when he was moved inside to 12. He was very, very solid. His tackling was excellent, especially for someone who's playing his first tournament at this level. So I had him bracketed with Fofana. I really like the way Barrett's tournament's gone. Jonathan Davis in the other centre berth, and Rob Kearney at full back. I mean, the Lions discussion that we'll have no doubt at some point in the future. Fullback's one of those real interesting positions, but good player though he is, I don't think Ben Foden really got enough of his hands on the ball in the first few games and made a couple of errors against Italy that nearly threw the game away. So definitely Rob Kearney, much the same backline for me.
Yeah, Mike, if I can come in there, just on your point on Barrett, I think he's been excellent. I mean, for me, he's been a Dan Lydiate sort of mould of centre. I mean, the tackles he puts in are unbelievable. He just hits, and doesn't stop. So I was really impressed by him as well, for sure. I agree with you on Foden as well. I think he's probably a more exciting player than Carney in terms of attack, but for me, Carney is so strong at his goalkeeping duties, and he's an excellent counter-attacker to boot as well. I'm really hoping for Foden to regain his form, because I definitely think he'd be a great full-back backup for the Lions tour.
Absolutely, and he can slot into other positions as well. Ben Foden can. He's a talented rugby player, very, very strong for pound for pound, and he looks like he started to regain a little bit of form towards the end of the tournament. He's really exciting when he's running out of defence. But I mean, Kenny's got that, and also he's working under the high ball, as you say. Fantastic. He had a great tournament.
Yeah, it's some terrific teams there, lads. Fair play to you. I want to ask each of you guys to name two players, one the player of the championship and two the emerging player of the championship. And I want to start with yourself, Mike. Would you go for Dan Lydiate? I know that a lot of the press have picked him for player of the championship. So who'd be your player of the championship and emerging player of the championship?
I think if picking one player is very, very difficult, and I think I probably would just nudge in favour of Dan Lydiate. Great tournament. The England front row as a unit, they've really impressed me, and they've laid the foundations for our success, which frankly at the start of the tournament, we looked like we could have been one of those sides who were battling out for the wooden spoon. So as a unit, I'm going to doff my cap to them. And as an emerging player of the tournament, Ben Morgan, he's really burst onto the scene and exciting to watch. Real go forward ball, big strong boy, good little offload on him, and just as I say, just great to watch on the hoof.
Okay, great stuff, Mike. And Doc, yourself, who's your player of the tournament and emerging player of the tournament?
Tough one. I think Lydiate's certainly going to be up there. I'd be a little bit parochial maybe if I was to nominate Ferris again, but to go a little bit left field, I'd suggest actually Rory Best, especially considering he was carrying an injury. I think in the position of hooker, I think he was head and shoulders above all the other home nations contenders for me, with only really Servat coming close to him. Of the emerging players, I think it'd be hard to look past Farrell. You'd have to admire a guy who comes in for his first cap at that age and plays two different positions, including out half, and made a pretty good fist of them. I don't think he's the finished article by a long way, and I think the Lions may come a season too early for him, but I thought he had an excellent tournament. Other guys I guess you could look at if you wanted to be a bit left field might be a guy like Tipperick, who only had a little bit of game time, but looks to me like one of the better sevens in the kind of traditional linking role of a seven that's out there, so I thought he had an excellent tournament too.
Yeah, how about that, William? Would you go for Tipperick as an emerging player, or would Richie Gray sneak in there? I know a Scotland player might not get it from this panel tonight, but who'd be your player of the tournament and your emerging player of the tournament?
Yeah, well, I've had my eye on Tipperick for a couple of seasons now, and he is. He's a real emerging talent, as is Richie Gray. Richie Gray's not a newcomer. He played last year as well, and he's a sensational player. But the young player for me that stood out head and shoulders above the rest is Owen Farrell. I think he just seemed so calm. Once he got his chance at 10, he took it. I think in a sense that England were quite fortunate that Hodgson got his little injury. Because for all his sort of silky skills, he doesn't really get a team going forward as well as he could. And Farrell just seemed to be a class player. I saw him, I think, as a 17-year-old playing I can't remember the game. It was a televised game that I watched as a 17-year-old kid. Okay, he missed a few kicks that night, but he was really, really good. And I thought, there's a guy with an immense amount of talent. So he would be the emerging player for me. And while I agree with talk about Rory Best, I thought he was head and shoulders above the other front row players for what he did around the pitch. But and again, I'm going to be completely parochial and say that Stephen Ferris to me looked head and shoulders above the rest of them. For everything that he did was good. 63 tackles, missed 2. Okay, he got wrongly penalised and wrongly cost Ireland a game against Wales. But I mean, a player should be allowed to tackle. That's just complete utter nonsense. There are other players who were very worthy as well. I should mention, for example, we talked about the backs, and my selection at fullback would have been Halfpenny, because he was secure under the high ball, was very good in attack, scored a couple of tries, and was also an excellent goal kicker. It's very hard to pick between him and Ferris for me for player of the tournament. I'm going with Ferris because he's an Ulsterman. I'm going to stick to my guns on that.
Fair play.
Ulster says Ferris.
Good man, William.
Ulster says Fez, yeah.
Fez, brilliant. And just on Farrell, the Lions tour, what do you think?
Well, him and Sexton, to me, would be the two outstanding 10s at the moment. I agree. I can't remember, it was Alan or Mike was saying that Priestland was incredibly erratic. Priestland is a guy with all the talents. You can see that he does some things. He's a good runner with the ball. He's got an enormous clearance kick on him. But then it all falls apart. He reminds me an awful lot of Ian Humphreys, and what he can do and what he often fails to do. So, I think of the two, I think it's Farrell and Sexton at the moment would be the ones who, for Lions, they would be the front runners.
Great stuff, William. And Alan, just coming to you on your player of the championship and your emerging player.
Player of the championship, Dan Lydiot. I would have picked Ferris before the final weekend, but Lydiot was just out of this world against France. I don't know how many tackles he made. It must be at least over 25 or 30. Just incredible work rate. Emerging, I'd have to go along with consensus, Owen Farrell.
Fair play to you, consensus, Owen Farrell. Yeah, I think Owen Farrell certainly is going to be a huge player. He's a big player now, but he'll be a huge player potentially in the